Doing a 2-for-1 this week just because I put off episode 6 until episode 7 came out, so there's no reason to do 2 different episodes. At the beginning of episode 6, we find the heel turn that we've been expecting, or at least I've been expecting and other manga readers have been expecting. And that is that our only real antagonist up to this point, Nikaido, has some interesting motivations for wanting to keep the mound. As it turns out, it was Nikaido's dying wish to stay on the mound, because as someone who was terminally ill and kept that information secret, he wanted to make sure that his wish would be fulfilled. But it's not because he wants to stay on the mound for the sake of staying on the mound. He wants to stay on the mound as a thank you to his father, who naively thinks of him as this genius athlete, but is still someone who deserves thankfulness and praise because of how he raised his son. It turned out to be a very courageous and selfless act that Nikaido did to thank his father, even though his father was in a completely weird parental mind state at the time. Luckily, Nikaido's surgery pulls him through and he miraculously recovers, and he decides after his recovery that he's no longer going to pursue baseball and he will happily cede his ace position to Toma. So we see a little bit of action of Toma and Soichiro as the leaders of the Meisei middle school team in their third year, but this gets fast forward really quickly and we just lose all sense of time for the third year, and it is explained that Meisei does not go far in the summer tournament because Toma jams his index finger on a sliding door. And that's fine with me because middle school baseball is not really the point of this show, so that they fast forwarded entirely to the first year of high school in the matter of a minute is totally acceptable. We get the introduction of one important character. During the previous episode, we see this mysterious man approach Toma and Soichiro's father, introducing himself as an old friend. He reappears in this episode and lets it be known to everyone that he has been hired as the coach of the Meisei High School Baseball Club. And he's brought with him a daughter named Haruka, who is Soichiro and Toma's age. Haruka is moving boxes when she meets Soichiro first, and Soichiro, being the player that he is, notices her immediately. Toma hasn't met her up to this point, but there is some romantic tension involving Toma in this episode as well. We watch Otomi as she's walking Punch up a snowy hill, and she recognizes the hill and flashes back to a time when she was much younger and injures herself on the snowy sidewalk. Toma has come to pick her up, and he quite literally picks her up and carries her all the way to their house. Otomi is very grateful and predicts that Toma will win the ace pitcher matchup that the young Soichiro and Toma have engaged themselves in. And when they get home, Otomi cries when she discovers that Toma has suffered a broken toenail and has filled his shoe with blood. Otomi interprets this as Toma being very selfless and courageous even through great pain, and sees this as the reason why Toma will end up beating out Soichiro and becoming a great pitcher. This flashback has some romantic tension involved because it has been mentioned in a previous episode that Otomi and Toma are not related by blood. But whether that will come to fruition is still undecided. Now, episode 7 begins in high school, where we find that Toma and Haruka have been placed in the same class. Unfortunately, they've also been placed in the same class as Nango, who is this slugger who is apparently very protective of Haruka. Haruka introduces herself to Toma, and it seems as if Haruka has some sort of interest in him. And this is kind of confirmed when Haruka and her father come over to the house to take a bath and eat some dinner. This is an excuse for some gratuitous fan service, which is, whatever. But putting Haruka and Otomi next to each other has established this short-haired, long-haired dynamic that we see in a lot of Adachi works. If you've read or watched Miyuki and H2, I think these two shows demonstrate this trope very effectively. Haruka's name is even a throwback to the short-haired Haruka Koga in H2, even though Koga has short hair and Haruka in Mix has long hair. There's also a throwback to Touch when we discover that Haruka is an accomplished rhythmic gymnast. And this is something that bugs me a bit because I remember watching Touch and thinking that having Minami being a rhythmic gymnast was just an excuse to get her in a leotard. And I understand that this show is a nostalgia trip and it's supposed to remind you of Touch, but is rhythmic gymnastics even a thing nowadays? Like, would it have been that hard to make her an acrobatic gymnast, someone who does floor exercises, someone who does uneven bars and other gymnastic things that are actually relevant today? I don't know, it just seems like more of a ploy to get the pretty girl in a skimpy outfit. Some other things of relevance, we get a new character at Meisei Middle School named Akai, who could be a potential suitor to Otomi. And we also see a funny scene at the end where Toma demonstrates his ability to the high school team and the coach, who was a bit reluctant to see his skills put on display at first. But once all the third-year pitchers designate themselves as role players once they see Toma, it becomes clear that he's going to be the ace of the team. So I'm glad we finally hit high school. We can finally start watching the high school baseball of this high school baseball show. Took about 7 episodes to get there, took 6 episodes to get introduced to the 4th important character. So let's hope that this show lasts more than the 6 episodes that we're promised next.